Hey guys, and welcome back to Hallway News. Let's talk about the presidential election. The candidates are out on the trail and they have gone to the TV stations, and it looks like change is really afoot in the public dialogue. It looks like the public represented through these TV programs are scorned lovers, and they're going to put the next one through the ringer. I want to talk about one show in particular by SBS, and I think they have actually blown the lid on this, although NBC, I believe, has also done a similar program, but in a more traditional interview format with the candidates. This one is called 대선주자 국민면접. So essentially it translates into the people's interview of the presidential candidates. And so they went straight off the bat. So the first person of this show that they interviewed was the leading candidate right now, Moon Jae-in. He's about 29-30% in the polls. He is the front runner, and he went first. And I do have to say that he is going first in a lot of these new media relations. Of course, President Park has been known for not being media friendly at all, and so I don't know if it's a conscious concerted effort to make a difference between Park Geun-hye. But for example, in the foreign press conference that we covered, where he was the first one to address the foreign press pool in Korea, well, that came at a political gamble. He definitely went against the grain, and guess what? Everybody else followed and copied him, but then it all just lost the steam. He was the first one out there, and he basically had the first mover advantage. That's also what looks like is going on with this show, and I would say I was shocked. I was surprised, because we could just see the stark difference with President Park's New Year's interview with that one guy from a traditional newspaper who has his own internet channel, but it just looks so old style and just basically old. And so the reason why I was shocked is that, first off, in the intro they were saying like, what the heck were we watching during the last presidential election that got us to this point, or what fed us the information that we based our decision on? Total shade at President Park, saying that we totally did not see the craziness that is underneath the surface of what's going on right now in the Blue House, and particularly the lady sitting there. So immediately what we saw from the staging is that the presidential candidate is very humbly going to where the people are. And in this case, the people are represented by this TV studio with the panel. And so he's basically come in to a job interview. And this is something I think that will definitely appeal to the younger voters, because they feel like they're always being judged. They always have to go out there and prove themselves. This is what a typical job interview does look like in Korea. You're kind of like being interrogated. You're sitting there. There's a long distance between you and like a panel of people who are judging you like every second and asking you all these questions. And suddenly they're turning it on its head. They said that, okay, we are hiring you. So suddenly we're getting like very strong messaging from the Korean public and media that the next president is truly an employee of the people. So I think gone are the days now, truly. I do think that we have turned a page. We have gone up a step in a step function of Korea's development, that the public dialogue is basically saying that gone are the days of this gilded automatic respect for politicians who can rule at a distance. And I would say that is not the people's fault, and that's not the people being pushy. I think that was the politicians' fault and the leadership fault of this generation right now. They lost that right, and they lost that mandate for being able to rule at a distance and have people listen. And frankly, the reason why I say it's not the people's fault is that I do believe the people would rather have the politicians at a distance. I do believe that instead of watching this interview program, although it is very important for democracy, people kind of just would rather watch entertainment. But everything has become so important. Our choices and actions have become so important. We all seem to like understand that we have to participate in the democracy up ahead, that we have to sacrifice our leisure time to all be students of the presidential candidates. There was a period back in late fall, early winter when the Chesun-sil scandal was exploding, when all the TV dramas weren't doing well because all the ratings were going to the news channels to follow Chesun-sil gate and all the twists and turns of the presidential impeachment scandal. And that, to a large part, is still the case. Instead of this, we got this. And instead of this, we get this. And instead of this, we're focused on this. And instead of that, we have to get this. Okay, well, he maybe passes. Okay, so right off the bat, the shade was fierce. One of the panelists said, how do you rule without charisma? Because your entrance was horrible. And then they also said, well, you ran back in the last election and it seemed like your heart was not in it. Why are you coming back around this time? And Moon Jae-in says that he definitely now has the will and the drive to run because he wants to help. He's looked at cases like the blacklist, he said, and particularly the Seoul ferry disaster, and he says that he's different now. And I do believe him in the sense that when I'm observing him in action, in 2012, I believe, the last election, pardon my French, had no balls. But suddenly, somehow, in the interim, and I would say recently in 2016, he definitely got presidential quality ones. And the reason I say this is that he seems like he is not afraid to now come down from the perch and challenge himself to address the people and answer their questions and be forthright and be humble. What we see a lot of the times is the insecurity of politicians take over and they want to control every single aspect of their public appearance, public debate, and whatnot. And of course, being controlled in the way you present yourself is important, but not at the expense of public dialogue, and actually not at the expense of you lacking the proper opportunities to challenge yourself and grow, so that when unexpected instances arise, that you can be tested. In this program, they actually gave him a scenario, Moon Jae-in a scenario, and like a quiz, kind of like a case study if you're doing like a job interview, saying like, if there's a terror attack on a subway, what are you gonna do? Show us the process. And this is very important for Koreans because now they don't trust the institution of government to save them in a public disaster. And so what I saw more often than not in these panelists was no fear and no hesitation in asking tough questions and expecting that a leader is going to lead and not be a ceremonial figure. And so you could see it in their eyes. Of course, they were still being polite, but you could just really see it in their eyes, like they're not going to take any BS and they want high quality out of their leaders. And so no kiss butt, like absolutely no kissing butt that usually goes on in these types of scenarios. On the other hand, I don't want a show pony for a president. I don't think the president should necessarily have to go in this format where they look like they're on a reality TV game show. I don't think, like, I wouldn't want my doctor to even be on a reality TV show, let alone a president being known for being good on reality TV. Moon Jae-in was asked, how do you relieve stress, especially if you have a fight with your wife? You know, see, this is getting a little saucy. So he said, well, I just kind of take it in and swallow it, you know, don't really explode much. And then one of the young guys was basically like, that's not good. That is not healthy. And so then he said, okay, well, I do like hiking. I like going out and hiking and going around. And sometimes, and then he kind of pivoted and Moon Jae-in said that sometimes he has to eat alone because his wife is off somewhere, maybe visiting her family, and he says that he has to eat alone. They ask him, well, like, what do you eat? And he says, oh, you know, just rice and kimchi, and I fry up a few eggs. So his main motto, he said, is that people come first. And they really asked, before what? And he said, before everything. And he said he believes this, or this is his call to action, because of the Seoul ferry incident. Because when we saw those high school kids and others drown on that sinking ferry, that honestly, everyone knows, did not need to happen. The people in that situation did not come first. Maybe the ferry company came first, the Coast Guard's line of command came first, people not knowing exactly what to do, or not wanting to piss people off in terms of chains of command that were not coordinated by the president. That came first, and not the people's safety and welfare. They asked him what's his biggest weakness, and he said, well, I don't really have the support from people in their 50s and 60s. He says he's 64, and he's sad that he doesn't have the big support of his counterparts. People who are in their 60s, in terms of these opinion polls, have called Moon Jae-in a communist, and they think he's too friendly to North Korea. And so in that generation, you do see a little bit of that, a lot of that hardline nationalism that veers definitely very much conservative. I mean, this was a long interview. At one point, he took off his jacket and was probably showing off some of the fashion sense that maybe he's been counseled on, or some, a fashion coordinator set up for him. One of the panelists said that he's been described as a 착한 남자, or a very nice guy, or a good guy. And they were implying or saying that, do we want like a nice guy for a president? Is that person gonna be strong enough? What about like the bad guy? And then Moon Jae-in just threw the shade right back. He said, well, let me reverse that on you. Do you want to hire for president a good guy, a nice guy, or a bad guy? And he said that I do not equate being a nice guy to weakness. And he said, actually, if you can go through life and be successful as a nice guy, then actually you are extremely strong. Because if you're able to go through life being nice and still win, then of course you're strong. I'm impressed, SBS. That's all I have to say. I'm impressed. Good job. Good job. And I can't wait to see the next one. And that's going to be An Hee-jung. He's also from the Democratic Party. He's also good friends with Moon Jae-in. But he's like a dark horse that has catapulted up into the polls. I think he's almost at about 20%. And so that's a very amazing feat, because I think when he started, of course, he was in the single digits, and he was able to outpace other people who have been in the race forever, like An Chol-soo. Geez, An Chol-soo, you better bring it to this SBS show. I'm gonna watch. I think that's the 3rd episode. So the Chesun-sil scandal continues. Special prosecutors have until the end of the month to wrap up their investigation. There are questions on whether it can be extended. We'll have more coverage for you on that in the upcoming video for this week. All right, thank you guys so much for sharing, liking, subscribing, and watching. We'll see you again next time. Bye-bye.